silver from the past. The lantern's glow flickered across the saloon table, throwing restless shadows against the walls. Caleb Porter sat with his hands poised mid-gesture, words dying on his tongue. His eyes were locked on the Apache Queen, who leaned forward slowly, deliberately, until the light revealed what hung around her neck. Silver. It caught the glow like a sudden flash of lightning, sharp and undeniable. The shape was unmistakable, a sunburst of intricate silver work with 3 turquoise stones dangling like frozen tears. Caleb's breath stopped cold. His chest ached as though a mule had kicked him. The world seemed to tilt under his boots, and for a moment all he could hear was the pounding of his own blood. That necklace could not exist. He had buried it himself 15 years ago in the rocky soil behind his family's cabin, buried it with his mother's remains after the fire. He remembered pressing the earth down with his own trembling hands, swearing he would never forget. And yet, here it was. Alive, gleaming, resting against the dark skin of a woman who stared back at him with knowing eyes. The Queen's lips curved faintly, the barest hint of a smile. She had seen his reaction. She had counted on it. "You recognize it," she said. Her voice was low, smooth as oiled leather, but with an edge sharp enough to cut. Caleb tried to speak, but his throat worked only air. He swallowed, forcing breath into his lungs, trying to steady hands that trembled against the wood grain of the table. "Where did you get that?" he rasped. The Queen tilted her head, and the lamplight slid across the planes of her face, catching in the turquoise stones. "It was given," she said calmly. "Long ago. By a woman who bled for her child." Caleb's mouth went dry. Images poured back in, too fast, too sharp. His mother's soot-streaked face, her rough, calloused hands shoving him toward the tree line as flames devoured their cabin. Her voice, breaking through smoke, "Run, Caleb! Run!" The circle closes. Caleb's fingers twitched with the urge to tear the necklace from her throat, to hold it in his own hand and finally end this nightmare of recognition. But the Queen's warriors loomed behind her like statues of black stone, their eyes unblinking, their hands never straying far from the hafts of their weapons. The saloon seemed smaller with them in it, the air tighter, the shadows heavier. He forced himself to stay seated, though every muscle in his body screamed to rise, to act. "You really expect me to believe my mother gave that to you?" Caleb asked, voice rough, cracking under the strain. The Queen's gaze never faltered. "Not to me," she replied calmly. "But it passed through fire and blood, through hands that carried her promise when she could no longer. To me, it is both a key and a burden." Her words fell with the weight of truth, though his heart rebelled against them. Caleb shook his head, jaw tight. "This is madness," he muttered. Yet the memory gnawed at him. The night rose again in brutal detail, the suffocating smoke, the roar of collapsing beams, the world lit orange and red. He could still smell the charred wood, still hear his mother's cry as she shoved him into the dark. And now, here was this woman, speaking as though she had picked up the pieces of that night and carried them across years and miles to place them on the table before him. "If you know where it came from," Caleb said, his voice sharpening, "then you know what happened." The Queen was silent for a long ashes in the wind. Caleb stepped back, his boots scraping against the floorboards as though the ground itself had shifted beneath him. The Queen's words clung to the air like smoke, impossible to wave away, impossible to forget. He felt as though he had been pushed to the edge of a canyon and told to leap, with no promise of what waited below. The saloon had emptied while they spoke. The piano stood silent. The cards on abandoned tables curled at their corners. Only the sound of the lantern's hiss and the faint creak of wood in the rafters remained. Caleb realized then how completely her presence had swallowed the room. He turned toward the door, desperate for open air. for the simple comfort of night. The queen let him pass, her warriors watching with predator's stillness as he shoved the door wide and stepped out onto the dust-choked street. The moon was a pale coin high above, silvering the rooftops, throwing long shadows across the empty road. Caleb drew in a breath, but even the night air could not clear the weight from his chest. Behind him, the door creaked again. He didn't turn, but he knew it was her. The queen moved without sound, yet the air itself seemed to shift with her presence. Echoes of the fire sleep did not come to Caleb that night. He lay in his narrow bed, staring at the cracked beams of the ceiling, listening to the restless creak of the house as if it, too, carried memories it could not silence. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the turquoise stones flashing in the lantern light, felt the heat of fire against his skin, heard his mother's last command, run. By dawn, his head throbbed with exhaustion, yet his body refused stillness. He pushed himself upright, pulled on his boots, and stepped outside. The land stretched before him in muted gray, the horizon barely touched with light. His ranch looked fragile in that hour, fences broken, pasture thin, cattle moving slow and lean. He walked among them, forcing his thoughts into the rhythm of work, counting heads, checking water troughs, tightening loose boards. Yet even the familiar tasks could not silence the voice in his head. The circle is closing. The fire will come. Across the burning valley, the heat of the flames pressed against Caleb even from a distance, a living force that turned the valley into a molten corridor of orange and shadow. His horse's hooves struck the hard earth with a pounding rhythm that matched the drum of his heart. Smoke curled into his eyes and nose, stinging, yet he could not turn back. The queen, Ayanna, moved like a phantom at the head of her riders, her cloak snapping in the wind, silver necklace catching every flicker of firelight. As he approached the outskirts of the inferno, Caleb could see the edges of the land scorched black, tufts of grass smoldering, and the distant cries of frightened cattle echoing over the hills. A herd had scattered, running in every direction, and the land bore the scars of the day's chaos. But it wasn't just fire that made him wary. It was the soldiers and bandits who had begun to converge from multiple directions, drawn by smoke, rumor, and greed. "Stay close!" Ayanna's voice cut over the wind. Her command was calm, precise, carrying authority that made the ride the weight of a promise. The necklace was colder than Caleb expected. The silver burned with moonlight, but when his fingers closed around it, the chill seeped through his skin like winter water. For a heartbeat, the fire around him seemed to fade, its crackle softened, its heat dulled, until all that remained was the weight of the pendant in his palm. The queen watched silently, her face unreadable, her eyes reflecting the restless flames. Around them, the riders kept their formation, but a subtle shift passed through the circle, a shared breath, a tension like the held note of a song. Caleb tightened his grip. The turquoise stones pulsed faintly against his skin as if something alive slept inside them. He tried to pull his hand back, but the pendant clung to him, the chain sliding like water until it rested fully in his grasp. "What is this?" he demanded. His voice cracked against the hush of the valley. The queen inclined her head slightly. "It is what she left you. The key, the choice." Caleb shook his head. "It's a necklace, that's all." The queen's gaze sharpened. "And yet you feel it. Tell me it is only silver and stone, and believe yourself as you speak." Caleb opened his mouth, but no words came. The cold of the pendant deepened, threading through his veins like ice. Behind his eyes a flicker of light bloomed, quick, blinding, gone before he could grasp it. His breath hitched. "What did you do to me?" "I did nothing," the queen said softly. "The blood remembers. The fire remembers. You are simply remembering with it." Caleb's heart hammered. The flicker returned, sharper this time. A flash of his mother's face, her eyes fierce, her hands clutching the same necklace as the world behind her burned. He heard her voice, faint but urgent. "Do not let them take it." He staggered back, nearly dropping the pendant. His horse sidestepped nervously, sensing his panic. The Queen's voice followed, calm but unyielding. "Your mother stood where you stand. She chose to carry the fire. Now the fire chooses you." Caleb forced a breath through clenched teeth. "I didn't ask for this. I don't want this." The Queen tilted her head, and for the first time her eyes softened. Neither did she. But wanting changes nothing. Some legacies are not gifts. They are burdens carried because the world demands it. Her words struck deep. Caleb thought of the ranch, of the years spent fighting drought and debt, of nights staring at the stars and wondering why the world felt heavier than it should. He had always believed the weight came from the land, but now he felt it in his blood, ancient and unyielding, like a river running beneath his skin. The riders shifted again, a ripple of motion like wind through tall grass. One of them, a young woman with streaks of white paint across her face, stepped forward. She carried a small drum, its hide stretched tight and dark. Without a word, she struck it once. The sound rolled through the valley, low, resonant, endless. Caleb felt it in his chest, in the bones of his horse, in the cold pendant pressed against his palm. The fire flared in answer, flames rising higher, bending toward the circle as if the earth itself had inhaled. Images burst behind his eyes, a canyon of red stone, a river running black under a starless sky, a child's cry swallowed by wind. He gasped, clutching the saddle to stay upright. The Queen stepped closer. "Do you see?" Caleb forced his eyes open. The vision faded, leaving only the circle of riders and the fire's restless glow. "I don't understand," he whispered. "You will," she said. But understanding is not the first step. Acceptance is. Caleb stared at the necklace in his hand, at the faint shimmer of turquoise, at the chain that seemed to hum with a rhythm older than words. Acceptance. The word felt like surrender. "What happens if I refuse?" he asked. The Queen's face remained serene, but her voice hardened like steel. "Then the fire will take what it is owed. Blood unclaimed still burns. You cannot unmake what your mother began." A silence stretched between them, heavy and alive. Caleb felt the eyes of every rider, every flame, every shadow pressing against him, waiting for a decision he did not know how to make. The drum sounded again, one slow, echoing beat. The flames leapt higher, painting the Queen's face in light and shadow. Caleb closed his fist around the necklace. He could not bring himself to drop it. He could not bring himself to wear it. He stood caught between two worlds, the valley holding its breath. The Queen stepped back, giving him space. "The fire will not wait forever," she said. "But for tonight, it will let you breathe. Choose wisely, Caleb Porter. Every dawn burns brighter than the last." The riders began to move, their horses shifting as the circle loosened. The drumbeat faded, replaced by the restless whisper of wind and flame. Caleb remained motionless, the necklace cold against his skin, the fire's glow seared. The edge of dawn. The first gray breath of morning crept across the valley as Caleb rode back toward his ranch. Behind him, the circle of riders dissolved into the fading firelight until nothing remained but the low smoke curling against the hills. The Queen and her warriors were gone as though they had been only a dream, yet the weight of the necklace in his pocket proved otherwise. The night's chill clung to his skin, but inside he burned. Every beat of his heart seemed to echo the drum's slow rhythm. He felt the necklace with every movement, its cold shape pressing against his thigh, humming faintly as if alive. His horse carried him through the silent plains. No bird stirred, no wind moved the grass. The world felt suspended, as if waiting for the first strike of the sun. Caleb's thoughts chased themselves in circles. His mother's voice, the Queen's words, the vision of black rivers and red stone. None of it fit the world he knew, yet all of it felt inevitable. When the ranch finally appeared on the horizon, its crooked fences and weathered barn looked smaller than he remembered. For years this land had been his anchor, the one thing he could hold against the chaos of drought, debt, and memory. Now it felt fragile, temporary, a thin crust over something vast and restless beneath. He dismounted in the yard, boots crunching over dry earth. The cattle shifted in their pens, uneasy though no predator stirred. Caleb stroked his horse's neck, whispering calm, though his own nerves were raw. Inside the house, the air smelled of old wood and last night's coffee. He dropped the necklace onto the kitchen table. It landed with a dull metallic thud, the turquoise catching a stray blade of morning light. The sound seemed too loud for the quiet room. Caleb sat opposite it, elbows on the table, head in his hands. He had spent 15 years burying the past, building fences around memory the way he built them around his cattle. And now, in a single night, the Queen had torn those fences down. A soft knock broke the silence. Caleb stiffened. Few people ever came this early. He rose, hand instinctively brushing the rifle leaning by the door, and opened it. Elias Harper stood on the porch, hat in hand, eyes shadowed with worry. "Morning," he said, voice low. Caleb nodded. "Harper." "Smoke's still rising," Harper said without preamble. "Posse's meeting at the crossing in an hour. Men are riled. They say the riders moved west. Toward your land, Caleb's chest tightened." "And you?" Harper shifted his weight. "I'm here because you're closer to them than anyone. Folks say you were seen heading that way last night. They're asking questions I can't answer." Caleb kept his face still, though his pulse quickened. "What questions?" Harper met his gaze. "Whether you're with them." The words hung heavy between them. Caleb thought of the Queen's eyes, the fire bending to her will, the promise in his blood. He thought of the necklace lying on the table behind him, its faint hum almost audible even now. "I'm not with anyone," Caleb said finally. Harper studied him a long moment, then nodded once. "Then stay that way. Whatever's riding with that fire, the men won't wait long before they start shooting. And once bullets fly, it won't matter who you stand with." He touched the brim of his hat and turned to leave. Caleb watched him ride off into the pale dawn, the echo of hooves fading into the quiet. When he closed the door, the necklace still lay on the table, untouched but not still. It pulsed faintly in the growing light, a subtle rhythm that matched the beat of his heart. Caleb reached for it, then stopped. His mother's voice rose again in memory. "Do not let them take it." Outside, the first rays of sun struck the hills, igniting the lingering smoke into streaks of gold and crimson. The day had begun, but the air carried the scent of ash, a promise that night's fire was not finished. Caleb stood at the window, staring toward the west, where the Queen had vanished. The land stretched endless and empty, but he could feel the hidden movement beneath it. A current older than cattle trails and fences, a rhythm that called to him with every breath. The necklace waited behind him, patient and cold. The posse gathered beyond the hills, restless and armed. Between them stood Caleb Porter, a man with a burden not of his choosing and a decision that could burn the world he knew to the ground. The sun rose higher, spilling light across the dry earth. Shadows shrank, choices grew sharp, and somewhere beyond the horizon the fire stirred again. The gathering storm. The sun climbed higher, burning the night's chill from the land, but the air around Caleb remained heavy with the memory of smoke. He saddled his horse again, every motion sharp and deliberate, the necklace still resting on the table behind him. He could not leave it, yet he feared what carrying it meant. At last, he slipped it into his pocket. The cold of the silver cut through the morning heat. The trail to the crossing was rough, littered with stones and dry brush. Caleb rode fast, the sound of distant voices carrying on the wind long before the posse came into view. As he approached, the low murmur of men sharpened into words, angry, urgent, laced with fear. Dozens of riders crowded the open flat near the dry riverbed. Their horses stamped and snorted, restless under the rising sun. Faces Caleb knew from years of trade and struggle turned toward him as he dismounted. Some nodded in greeting, others narrowed their eyes with suspicion. Elias Harper stood at the center, hat low, rifle slung across his back. He looked up as Caleb approached, his expression a careful mask. "Porter," he said, "didn't know if you'd come." Caleb scanned the crowd. Would have been harder to stay away. The men shifted, forming a rough circle around them. Caleb recognized ranchers from 3 valleys over, merchants from town, even a few drifters drawn by the promise of violence. Their faces were hard, their eyes tight. Fear, Caleb thought, always wore the mask of anger. Harper spoke loud enough for all to hear. "You were near the smoke last night." Caleb kept his voice steady. "I saw the fire." "Same as you. And the riders?" Another man called out. A broad-shouldered rancher named Briggs, known more for his fists than his words. "You see them?" Caleb hesitated. The Queen's face flashed in his mind, the fire bending to her will. "I saw movement," he said finally. "Can't say who." A murmur rippled through the group. Briggs spat into the dust. "Can't say or won't." Caleb met his gaze without flinching. "I'm not in the habit of guessing when men's lives are at stake." Briggs stepped forward, jaw tight. "Then let's stop guessing. They're Apache. Everyone knows it. Same devils our fathers fought. We ride west now. We end it before they burn every ranch from here to the border." The crowd rumbled in uneasy agreement. Caleb felt the shift in the air, fear sharpening into purpose, purpose bending toward violence. Harper raised a hand. "And if we're wrong? If this isn't war," Briggs sneered, "then we ride for nothing and come home. Better that than wait for them to come to us." The men muttered approval. Horses stamped. Rifles shifted in restless hands. Caleb's heart pounded. He saw again the Queen's circle of riders, the silent discipline of their movements, the fire that seemed almost alive. This was no random raid. Whatever it was bigger than the old fights these men feared, and blood would only feed it. "If you ride west," Caleb said, his voice cutting through the noise, "you'll find more than you're ready for. Those riders aren't a band of thieves. They move like they know the land better than we ever will. You go looking for war, you'll find death." The crowd stilled. Briggs turned, eyes narrowing. "You sound like a man who's already chosen a side." Caleb stepped closer, fists clenched at his sides. "I've chosen not to spill blood for a fight none of us understand." Briggs's lip curled. "Sounds like fear." "Call it what you want," Caleb said evenly, "but fear keeps men alive." The tension snapped like a drawn rope. Several men shifted their rifles, the metallic click of bolts sliding home, breaking the morning quiet. Horses tossed their heads, sensing the charge in the air. Harper moved fast, stepping between them, palms raised. "Enough!" His voice rang out sharp as a gunshot. "We're not here to kill each other." The circle held, taut and dangerous. Caleb met Briggs's stare and refused to look away. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. Then a sound cut through the standoff. A distant beat, low and steady, like the echo of a drum. Faint, but unmistakable. Every head turned west. Caleb's stomach tightened. He knew that rhythm. The fire was calling again. A rider at the edge of the group pointed toward the hills. "Smoke!" he shouted. A thin column rose against the pale sky, dark and deliberate. Briggs spat into the dust. "There's your answer," he growled. "We ride." The posse surged into motion, riders into the fire. The sun stood high and white as the posse thundered westward, a storm of dust rising behind their hooves. The land stretched empty ahead, a wide basin of scrub and stone that shimmered under the heat. Caleb rode near the rear, eyes fixed on the thin column of smoke twisting upward in the distance. The drumbeat still throbbed faintly in his ears, though no one else seemed to notice. The men rode hard, spurred by fear and the promise of confrontation. Horses lathered, breath tearing from their throats, the dry earth cracked beneath the pounding of iron shoes. Caleb tasted grit in every breath, felt the necklace cold against his chest, its pulse matching the rhythm of his racing heart. Elias Harper dropped back beside him, voice low beneath the roar of hooves. "If this goes bad, you ride out. Don't wait for my word." Caleb kept his eyes on the horizon. "And leave you?" "Better one of us makes it back," Harper said. "These men—" He glanced toward Briggs at the head of the column, rifle across his saddle, jaw set like stone. "They're riding for blood. I can't hold them if shooting starts." Caleb said nothing. He knew Harper was right. The men were beyond reason now, driven by a hunger older than memory. The smoke grew darker as they closed the distance, spreading into a wide black plume that stained the hard blue sky. The scent of burning cedar reached them first, sharp and bitter. Horses snorted and tossed their heads. The air tasted of ash and iron. Then the drums began. Faint at first, like a heartbeat hidden beneath the earth, the sound swelled as they rode. Slow, deliberate, each strike rolling across the basin like distant thunder. The horses shied at the rhythm, muscles quivering beneath sweat-slicked hides. Briggs raised a hand and the posse slowed. Silence fell, except for the steady beat of the drums and the restless shifting of hooves. Ahead, the basin narrowed into a shallow valley. At its center, a ring of fire burned low and steady, smoke rising in dark spirals. Figures moved within the haze, riders cloaked in shadow, their horses black silhouettes against the flame. Caleb's breath caught. The Queen was there. He felt her presence before he saw her, a pull as sure as the tide. The riders emerged from the smoke one by one, silent and precise. They formed a wide circle facing the posse, their horses standing unnaturally still. The firelight caught the edges of their weapons, bows, spears, rifles worn smooth with use. Their eyes glowed with the reflection of the flames. The Queen rode forward. She wore the same black and turquoise cloak, her hair braided with silver beads that caught the sun. The necklace she had given Caleb gleamed faintly beneath her collar, its twin to the one in his pocket. Her eyes locked on his across the distance, calm and unyielding. Briggs spurred his horse ahead, rifle raised. "This land ain't yours," he shouted. "You turn back now, or we'll drive you out." The Queen did not move. The drums slowed, each beat echoing like the fall of distant mountains. Briggs cocked his rifle. "Last warning!" Caleb's heart hammered. He felt the necklace pulse, a cold vibration that climbed his spine and burned behind his eyes. He saw the valley not as it was, but as it had been. Green rivers cutting through red stone, herds of deer moving like dark rivers, the sky alive with smoke and stars. The Queen raised her hand. The fire leapt higher, a sudden wall of flame that roared without wind. Horses reared and screamed. Men cursed, gripping reins and rifles. Heat rolled over them like a living thing. Briggs fired. The shot cracked the air, sharp as lightning. A single spark leapt from the Queen's cloak and vanished. The bullet had not touched her. The drums stopped. For a breathless moment the world held still. Then the fire shifted. It bent inward, folding around the Queen and her riders like a living shield. The heat pressed against Caleb's skin, but it was not the dry burn of ordinary flame. It pulsed with purpose, alive and watching. Caleb heard a voice, not with his ears, but inside his chest. A whisper like stone breaking under water. Choose. Harper shouted something, lost in the roar. Men scrambled for cover. Briggs swore and chambered another round. Caleb swung down from his horse, the necklace blazing cold against his heart. He felt the weight of every choice he had ever made pressing down like the desert sky. He stepped forward, past Harper's outstretched hand, past the restless horses and the trembling men. The Queen's eyes never left his. Behind him, rifles clicked. Ahead, the fire waited. Caleb crossed the threshold of flame. The heat swallowed him whole, and the world went silent, the heart of the flame. The fire closed around Caleb like a living wall. Heat pressed against his skin, but it did not burn. The flames hissed and twisted, their color shifting from red to deep violet to a shimmering blue that pulsed with an otherworldly light. He felt the ground tremble beneath his boots, a slow, steady rhythm like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Behind him came the muffled cries of men and horses, but they sounded distant, as though carried across miles of empty desert. Ahead, the world changed. The valley was gone. Caleb stood in a vast canyon of red stone and shadow. Rivers of black glass wound through the earth, glowing faintly as if lit from below. The sky overhead swirled with silver clouds that spun in perfect circles, their edges laced with stars. The air smelled of cedar and rain, clean and sharp, untouched by time. The Queen waited at the center of a wide plateau. Her horse stood motionless beside her, its dark coat gleaming like obsidian. She raised her head as Caleb approached, her eyes catching the light like twin shards of turquoise. "You crossed," she said, her voice carrying with the weight of stone and wind. Caleb swallowed, the sound loud in the strange silence. "What is this place?" "The truth," the Queen replied. "The world beneath the world. The land as it was, before fences and maps. Before men forgot how to listen, Caleb turned slowly, taking in the impossible landscape. "Is this real?" The Queen stepped closer, her cloak whispering over the stone. "As real as the fire that brought you here. As real as the blood that binds you to it." She reached toward him, palm up. "The necklace." Caleb hesitated, feeling its cold weight in his pocket. "What is it?" "A key," she said, "and a promise. Your mother carried it before you, her mother before her. Each chose whether to guard the flame or let it die." His breath caught. "My mother, she knew," the Queen said gently. "She saw what you now see." But fear kept her from stepping through the fire. She passed the choice to you. Caleb's mind spun. Memories of his mother flooded back. The way she whispered to the earth when planting seeds. The nights she stared into the fire as though listening for something only she could hear. The Queen's eyes softened. "The land is waking, Caleb Porter. The rivers dry, the storms grow fierce, the old trails vanish. The world of men tightens its grip, but the flame still waits. It needs a guardian." Someone who remembers Caleb shook his head. "I'm no guardian. I'm just a rancher trying to hold on to a piece of dying land." "You are more than you know," she said. "Blood remembers even when the mind forgets." The necklace burned cold in his palm as he drew it out. The silver and turquoise shimmered with the same shifting colors as the fire. It pulsed in time with his heartbeat, each throb echoing through the canyon. "If I take this," Caleb said quietly, "what happens to the world I leave behind?" The Queen's gaze held his. "It will go on. Fences will rise, rivers will dry. But you will walk between. You will carry the flame, so that when the land calls again, someone will answer." Caleb felt the weight of the choice press down like the endless sky. Behind him lay the posse, the ranch, the life he had built from dust and stubbornness. Ahead lay a path older than memory, a promise written in fire and blood. He thought of Harper's steady friendship, of the men who rode for fear and vengeance, of the cattle and the brittle grass, and the endless struggle to keep them alive. He thought of his mother's quiet strength, her voice whispering through the years. Do not let them take it. Caleb looked into the Queen's eyes. And if I refuse? Then the flame will sleep, she said, and when it wakes again, there may be no one left to hear its call. The drums began once more, slow and deep, echoing through the canyon. The sound wrapped around Caleb like a heartbeat, steady and eternal. He closed his fingers around the necklace. The cold became warmth. The warmth became light. For a heartbeat, the canyon flared bright as noon, the rivers of glass surging with molten fire. Caleb breathed in the scent of rain and cedar, the taste of smoke and stars. Then he stepped forward. The Queen smiled, not of triumph, but of recognition. Welcome, she said softly, guardian of the flame. The drums quickened, the canyon spun, and the fire rose to meet him.